What do you think of that, guys? Isn't that a sexy Emerson? This is, of course, the tactical Kwaiken. And, geez, look at those grinds. Holy shit, this thing is just. I mean, look at that edge. It's just badass. I gotta say, this Kwaiken is probably one of my favorite Emerson designs. Just purely aesthetic, like the lines that it has going on. Like, look at that clean, continuous sweep from tip all the way to the butt of this knife. Just the only thing sticking up is that wave, like a shark fin coming up out of the water. Just looks dangerous. And then this nice, smooth, gradual kind of sweep from tip all the way across the handle, coming to the back here. The satin grind, the stone wash, this little swedge or kind of grind up top here. It makes this thing look sharp. It almost looks like a hollow grind, but it's not. It's the kind of standard saber grind that Emerson does with the chisel final edge. So you can see on the back here. But yeah, this is a beautiful, beautiful knife. Like I said, one of the sexiest knives that I think Emerson produces, and I've had it now for about 6 months, and yeah, I've really enjoyed this knife. There's a lot to love with it, and while there are a few minor drawbacks that really are kind of personal preference more than they really are like flaws in the design, I think that yeah, it's just a sweet knife, and I'm excited to be showing it to you guys. I've definitely held on to it long enough, and come up with some opinions on it for you. So, anyways, let's start with some overall dimensions. The knife is 9 inches overall when it's open, so this is a big knife. I mean, as you can see, this thing's taking up both of my hands. When I put my hand on the grip, there's an inch hanging out the back, and 3/4 up front. It's a large knife. When it's closed, this thing comes in at 5 3/16, just the handle length. So very large. I can show it to you next to some of the other Emersons you might be familiar with. That's it next to the Tiger. So it's it's around the same size as the Tiger, a little bit shorter than the Tiger. But as you can notice right away, it's a lot nicer width-wise than something like the Tiger, or even something like a Commander. All of these come in much wider. Let's see, I didn't actually measure. Let's get a quick measurement on that width. So at its widest portion, at the wave, we're looking at like 1.5, a little less than 1.5. And then most of the handle comes in at like 1.25, it looks like, something like that. So it's really not too bad. It's actually quite comparable to a CQC7 as far as like overall width goes. Pretty similar. And what's great about that is it makes it very carryable. Not that I have any problem carrying either of these knives. I love the Tiger, I love the Commander, I love large knives in general don't really bother me. But that said, it doesn't mean that I can't appreciate something that's a little more narrow, like either the CQC or this Kwaiken. Just because it's kind of a little more low profile in your pocket, certainly not a deep carry clip or anything like that. You do still have a chunk of knife poking up out of your pocket, but that's what you need in order to get, a good grab on it. And it's just as much as you would need, not too much. Certainly not as much as something like your Tiger or your Commander. So yeah, carries really well in the pocket, even though it is a very large knife. One of the things that I really do love is how this blade just sort of like disappears into the handle. You can see how it just it's actually below the handle there, which is really interesting. Not a lot of other knives do that. Definitely no other Emersons that I know of have the blade disappearing into the handle like that. Maybe the A100. I'm not sure. I don't have one of those, but this does kind of remind me of that A100 style. But yeah, it's just a really cool design feature to have that blade disappear into the handle. Looks so good when you're closing it. Like, hang on, yeah, let me try and close that with a little more finesse, but you can see it kind of wants to pull it back in at the right moment. Yep, there we go. The detent just sort of sucks it in that last millimeter or two. I guess we should talk, since we're talking detent, talk about deployment on this thing. So there's of course the thumb stud, the wave, and yeah, those are your ways of opening it. But you can flick it really easily. It flies open with the flick. Same with the thumb, just flies open. And then as far as like its drop shuttiness, when you drop that thing there, let's see, yeah, it does want to drop. It's a little sticky because honestly I use this in the kitchen a lot and I have yet to take it apart. I did just oil it, but it had like apple gunk and stuff inside there, and it probably still has it in there. But when I first got it, it dropped like very cleanly, and it still does pretty good. So yeah, definitely nothing I can complain about. Pretty good action on this guy for sure. I would say, the biggest thing about this Kwaiken, kind of I'd say the one thing that I would critique or would say that has, kind of like been a drawback for me in carrying and using this a lot is it's just this blade design. This thing is extremely, extremely aggressive. That tip is super, super fine. Not that I'm worried that I'm going to break it, because it does still have a decent amount of material out here to the edge or to the tip. But more in the sense that if I take this out and carry it and then pull it out to use it for some utility task, this blade alone is just terrifying to people. Like, this thing looks horribly dangerous. This thing looks like a weapon. There's really not a lot of ways around it. I feel like as much as something like the Tiger is also, a formidable knife, it just doesn't, it has more of a utility look, at least in my eyes. Maybe I'm deluding myself, but of these two, this one is way more frightening. The Kwaiken is gonna leave people quaking in their boots, whereas the Tiger is, it's a cool knife. It doesn't have it quite as weaponized a look about it. So yeah, I don't know. For some reason the extremely aggressive design of this Kwaiken has kind of somewhat put me off of carrying it in mixed company. Around the house, I use it all the time because, much like the Tiger, again, it has that nice, clean, just one long sweeping belly. And what's great about something like that is that it just makes for an amazing cutter on all manner of surfaces, whether you're cutting, paper or food or, this is actually very good on a cutting board as well. Like much like the like the Tiger, that kind of ability to the fact that it has the lowered blade allows you to get down onto that cutting surface and do these kind of rocking cuts or draw cuts. Same thing goes with the Kwaiken, and possibly even more so because the angle on this sweep is kind of like if you take a look at compared to the Tiger, the sweep is more parallel to the ground plane, versus the Kwaiken has more of a diagonal. So you're actually kind of being able to elevate the handle a little bit more and do a little bit more of this type of like cutting or draw cuts. So very good for food slicing and processing on a cutting board. The drawback, again, going back to this super fine tip and this beautiful clean line, is that if say you need to move some food around or whatever, you've sliced a bunch of peppers or something, you want to move it off to the side, it's kind of difficult to do with this. Your best bet is going to be maybe sort of like using the edge like that, because the problem is if you try and go this way, as you can see, the only points of contact are the tip and the wave. So there's no way to push with the top. I guess your best bet is going to be like kind of laying it on its side and sort of dragging like this. It's just not quite as clean. And the tip is, again, it is so fine, it is so acute that it's just sticky. That's one of the things I will say is, like, as you're using this, you're very, very aware of how sticky this tip is. It just wants to hang up on a lot of things because it's just so fine and it so wants to bite, So that's, something to keep in mind. Again, personal preference, because if you do a lot of fine detail work, that tip is a real blessing. So like what I do use this a lot for is like tomatoes. I'll actually go, into the other room, pick up this knife, come back just to cut up tomatoes because, you know how tomatoes are. If they're a little bit soft, they're a bitch to get into with a knife that isn't just razor sharp. And a lot of times they're juicy, right? So you don't want to be putting too much pressure on it because you got juice going everywhere. So I use this tip to take out that top portion where the stem meets. So you get in there, rotate it out, and you can kind of pop out that kind of hard central core really easily with a knife like this. And then even in hand, I can hold a tomato and slice the thing up. I mean, I wouldn't try it at home because you could be asking for a real problem by, cutting stuff up in your hand. But if you know what you're doing, as I do, I've found this thing just to be like, this is the best, I mean, just as good as the Tiger. There's something about that chisel edge that really works very well on food, I've found. So, like I said, I've had this for, 6 months. I've not hard used it. I haven't been like muscling it through a bunch of aggressive shit like cardboard and, cordage and weird stuff like that, just because that's not how I use this knife. I've opened packages with it. I've done a little bit of cardboard cutting with it, but mainly food on a cutting board. So it maintains its edge pretty well. But like I said, I've had it for 6 months. I have not stropped it or sharpened it or anything. And we're talking still extremely, extremely sharp. Let's see if we can do some fine curls. Yeah, it is very sharp. I'll give you I'll cut some cardboard here and you can see what you're looking at. Obviously, it's a thicker knife. The blade stock is, I think, .125. I think that's pretty standard for most Emerson knives. So, but it still cuts pretty damn nice, Like, that's minimal force. And again, that tip allows you to get in there and, really kind of easily penetrate and cut through things. So, very useful in that sense. And yeah, so I mean, it is a really slick knife, a really sexy knife. Again, my main thing is it's extremely aggressive, so be careful about where you're showing this thing off. And it's extremely sticky, so be aware of that tip. You could easily ventilate yourself if you're not paying attention. But yeah, otherwise, such a sweet knife. Carries extremely well. Not overly heavy for an Emerson. Keeps its edge really nicely, and just cuts through shit like it's not even there. Other little things, I guess I could kind of, if I'm going to be nitpicking, I will say I just noticed this while I was about to do the review. I think it's a little strange. Let's see. Can you see this? See how there's this kind of like scallop in here? Let's see. Right in here. Yeah, so I guess this is because, so you have this sweeping curve, right? That's kind of like the shape of the scales, right? Or the liners. And then I guess there was also a little bit of an additional finger relief here so that you can get to this, get to the titanium liner lock here. But what it does is it kind of like, it dips in slightly, and then there's this weird little, like, again, this sort of like, I don't know, it's like, I just wish that this line had just been one continuous sweep, Like, don't go and add a little finger cutout on top of this already, like, very similar curving line. Like, it just too many, I don't know, like in design, they call that kind of like a tangent. Like, it's just a weird, it almost doesn't look intentional, because on the scales, the G10 here, let's see, get that to focus. It's not really all that noticeable. You can feel it slightly. It is slightly there, even on the G10. You can see there. But it's very noticeable on that one portion of the metal liner there. You could probably fix that just by coming in with a file if you took this apart. But, that's a little bit more than I plan on doing. It doesn't bother me. Literally, I just noticed it while I was sitting here putting it under a microscope, trying to come up with things to talk about. So, obviously not that big a deal, hasn't really affected me very much in, my enjoyment of the knife. Sorry about that, guys, camera wiggling. One more thing before I let you go. Let me show you the tactical folding Kwaiken next to the Kwaiken neck knife, because it's just kind of an interesting comparison. Two really nice looking knives there. And it really kind of, since this neck knife has more of a straight back to it, kind of shows how curvy, how much of like a swoop this folding Kwaiken has. Of course, this this paracord wrap is my own little addition on the neck knife, but yeah, kind of a cool little combo, nice little pair. One notable difference is, look at the stock thickness. That neck knife is a lot beefier. I mean, not a lot beefier, but it is considerably thicker stock than the folding Kwaiken. Also, you can see the folding Kwaiken just has a little more refinement with that upper swedge there, versus this kind of more brass tacks neck knife. But yeah, two really nice badass Emerson Kwaikens. All I need now, right, is the fixed blade. That would completely finish off the Kwaiken lineup. But we'll see about that. I'm pretty happy with this for right now. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this little bit of a look at the Emerson Kwaiken. If you like the knife, if you like the look, and you're not afraid to rock something that is this aggressive, this stabby, I say by all means go and get yourself one, because you will not be disappointed. Anyways, have a great day, guys. That's Rojimbo out. Later.